between us?
No one.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Gators Online Show. I am Keith Niebuhr. That is Zach Albaverdi. We've got a big Florida-Miami game to preview on today's show. We've got a special guest from the Miami Herald, and we're also going to talk some Florida basketball. Not long before we recorded this, some breaking news came out of the University of Florida that we definitely want to dig into. It's near and dear to the hearts of two Gainesville area natives, and we are that. So, Zach, Florida-Miami week.
Yeah.
We got to get rolling. Just before we do an ad read, just, this is one of those big games that Florida needs to win.
It is, man. And this, we called it a must-win game going into the season. I still feel like it's a must-win game. Just obviously for the fan base, I think for this program. They haven't won at Miami Key since 1985. That is a long time.
It's a long time ago. I was only 30 back then.
I wasn't even born.
All right, before we really get rolling, you got to pay some bills here. So let's have you take it away.
Let's do that. Let me grab this bad boy off of the screen, and then let's get going for you guys. With GameTime.co. College football season is underway. The tailgates are popping, the stands are full, and you guys want to be there for all the action. But as you know, it can be frustrating to find tickets on a weekly basis. Well, the GameTime app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in a few taps. It's incredibly easy to use, and the GameTime guarantee means you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. No surprise fees at checkout, and you can get college football tickets for as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying them with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code ON3. That's ON and the number 3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download the GameTime app today.
All right, Zach. And so after going to Tiger Stadium, playing number 3 LSU, very close, tight game, Florida falls 20-10, largely because of the turnovers, the 5 interceptions. Now they got to go down to Miami and face number 4 Miami. So week after number 3, you get number 4. You're playing the Miami Hurricanes at Hard Rock Stadium. They haven't won in Miami, like you said, and Hard Rock Stadium, for those who are going to critique us, technically is in Miami Gardens, but Florida hasn't won at Miami, as you mentioned, Zach, since 1985. That game was at the Orange Bowl. Wasn't even at this stadium. I need to point something out. They haven't beat Miami down there since 85. They have won down there, obviously, in different Orange Bowl games, one being for the national championship over Oklahoma. But, Zach, this is you're coming off one huge test. You didn't pass it, and now you got another one. And quite frankly, I mean, the eye test says that Miami may be better than LSU if you really want to look at it and break it down. They've got a couple better wins than I think LSU does. Their offense is, LSU's offense isn't very good, if we're being totally honest. And defensively, LSU's might be stronger. Intimidating stadiums, okay, you give the edge to LSU. But this is a good Miami team, is it not? A really good Miami team.
100%. No, I think you have an argument that they should be ranked the number 1 team in the country right now, just based on their resume and how well that they've performed. They're elite right now on both sides of the ball. That matchup between their offense and Florida's defense, I can't wait to watch, because Florida's defense, despite the losses in the last 2 games, has been playing pretty solid, and especially on the road in Baton Rouge. So, but defensively, Miami has just been dominant, especially defending the run. And to be able to see if Florida can, establish that against them with Jaden Baugh, something that they haven't probably done at the level that they needed to the last 2 games. But this is probably, going into the season, Keith, I agree with you. I think I kind of viewed LSU as what would be maybe the toughest road environment, road test for the Gators. I'm not so sure. I think that it's probably this matchup now.
Well, let's go back to 1985. Again, you weren't born, I was, but I was young. The back at that time,
Nor was Jordan McPherson.
that's right. But back at that time, there were still more Florida alums living in Miami-Dade County than there were alums of other schools, right? The dynamic has changed down there. I'm down in Miami every couple of months, as you know, Zach. I kind of like to get my party on, you know what I mean? And no, but when you look at Miami-Dade County, you're not seeing Gator flags down there much anymore. It is Miami country. It really is. And our guest, Jordan McPherson of the Miami Herald, will can lay that out for us. But in the old days, again, 1985, you're talking about, it was probably 70-30, 80-20 Florida fans back at the Orange Bowl. It's not like that anymore. It is not like that anymore. It's going to be a lot more Miami fans. They got a great team. So what's happened so far is Miami has a 27-24 win over Notre Dame, a good solid win, although Notre Dame has since lost by 1 at home to Texas A&M. 45-3 over Bethune-Cookman, kind of like Florida's 55-0 win over LIU. Yep. Means nothing. They probably could have scored 80 if they wanted to. And then last week, I think that was kind of the eye-opener for a lot of Gator fans, Zach. And
no
Jordan
doubt.
Can get into this too. 49-12 over a USF team that had just beaten Florida the prior week, 18-16 at the Swamp. Now, you could argue.
And beaten Boise State.
That's right. And if you want to argue this, I guess you could. You could say Florida loosened the jar. In other words, Florida had made USF put everything on tape. And so Miami had all that to go off of. They still won by 37.
Yeah.
And Florida lost to them at home. So, you could spin that any way you want. Florida lost to them. They killed them. I don't know how you spin that. But every game is its own and its own unique identity, its own entity, so to speak. But this is a good team. And again, we're going to bring on Jordan in a minute here. One thing, Zach, though, I thought this is kind of interesting. A year ago, there were a lot of people chirping before the season, a lot of fans of other teams. This quarterback, Cam Ward, I mean, come on, man. This guy, man, whatever. The guy almost wins the Heisman Trophy in his one season at Miami. They win 10 games. Got some sloppy losses.
Number one overall pick.
That's right. Fantastic player. Well, this offseason, what did we hear? Carson Beck's lost it. He's not the Carson Beck of a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Well, Miami, as it turns out, has got a pretty good offensive line he's playing behind. In 3 games, he's thrown for 812 yards. He's completing 79% of his passes, Zach. He has 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I believe both interceptions were last week. So still somewhat of a concern, I would think. I mean, he threw 12 last year. So certainly something to keep an eye on. And Miami has great balance in this offense. And again, we're going to get into that in a minute. Mark Fletcher's rushed for over 270 yards. They've got some great young receivers. And as we mentioned, the offensive line is this is a dynamic offense, Zach. This is going to be a real battle for Florida.
Yeah, it is. And I think, too, that I'm with you. I agree with your assessment there. I think people underestimated Cam Ward going into last season. And I think that people underestimated Carson Beck going into this season. I think seeing how his Georgia season kind of played out last year, certainly his performance against Florida, which was not good, I think maybe had, at least in Gator Nation, had a lot of fans thinking that Beck was going to be a major step down from Cam Ward and that Carson Beck wouldn't be able to do or look as good as he did at Georgia. And again, through 3 games, but that has not been the case. He's very sharp coming off of that offseason surgery. He's found a system that he really seems to be excelling in, and he looks comfortable and like he's having fun out there again. So it's been a great move for him. He's got, like you said, a great offensive line in front of him, but he's also got some weapons too that have emerged, including a really talented freshman receiver. So, like I said, I can't wait to watch this matchup with their offensive unit against this Florida defense. Florida's defense is going to have to show up in this game to keep Florida in it.
One quick thing. Florida's defense right now is allowing only 264 yards a game. That's 28th nationally, only allowing 12.6 points per game. However, we need to point out LIU FCS team, right? LSU, not a top 100 offense, Zach. Now, Florida had something to do with that, but they've also played 2 other games and their offense has laid an egg in those games as well.
Yeah.
USF.
Don't tell that to Brian Kelly.
Well, that's true. USF, not a top 100 offense. So Florida has not played a top 100 offense in the FBS level this season so far. So Miami's offense ranks 42nd in total yardage, 486 yards a game. And also the Hurricanes are scoring 40.3 points a game. So a real test. We ready to bring on our guest, Zach? What do you think?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Jordan.
Let's hear about the Hurricanes from our guy, Jordan McPherson from the Miami Herald, a UF grad, a former UF beat member. Always great to visit with him. We had him in the Swamp last season. Jordan, welcome into the show. How's it going?
It's going great, Zach. Great to see you again, man.
Absolutely, man. We got football season in full swing. We got the Florida-Miami rivalry back once again. And it's been a great start to the season for the Canes and a not so great start to the season for the Gators. I do want to get your thoughts on Florida at some point because you've got great perspective on this program. But tell us a little bit about Miami. We talked about Carson Beck and his stepping into those shoes this season. Just what's been your early assessment of their year so far?
Yeah, I mean, they've exceeded my expectations to this point. You touch on Carson Beck, so I'll hit on him first. I was really curious and really interested to see, not only which Carson Beck that Miami would get, whether it was his first year as a starter at Georgia or what we saw last year, and also how much he would try to maybe put pressure on himself to try to replicate all the heroics, all of the just incredible stuff that we saw from Cam Ward last season.
Yeah.
And he hasn't tried to do too much. That was my main concern, especially that Notre Dame game. I thought, okay, he's going to try to do too much. He's going to try to be the guy, try to be the hero, try to do basically everything and anything to make sure Miami won that game. And he didn't have to, and he didn't. He made the throws he needed to. He trusted his run game. He trusted his offensive line. He trusted his defense. And he made sure that he was a role, but not overdoing it to the extent where hard to force things. So that was the first real test for me. He passed that with flying colors, and that's continued throughout the past 2 weeks. Obviously, Bethune-Cookman, sort of like the UFLIU game. That's you go in that game, you get out healthy, and you move on to the next one. USF, after they beat Florida and came into that matchup wanting to be the Giants Slayer for a third week in a row, just took care of business. They handled it like we thought they would going into the season. And overall, they've been very balanced. I mean, Carson Beck is obviously the story that everyone's going to talk about, but they have a three-headed monster in the run game with Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle, and Marty Brown, who came over from FCS champion North Dakota State. They have like 6 or 7 different receivers that Carson Beck trusts in the passing game. And their defense, which was their Achilles heel last year, it's stepped up so far this year. I mean, if Ruben Bain stays healthy on that defensive line, he's going to be a menace the rest of the season. And that literally sets everything else up for that defense to succeed. So 3 weeks in, they've looked the part. Now it's just a matter of seeing how they continue that throughout the rest of the season.
Zach, I'll ask one real quick. Jordan, you broke down the offense beautifully there. But, man, I mean, if they don't have this offensive line, I don't know that we're talking about all these other guys the way we're talking about them. To me, everything does obviously start up front there. And they kind of manhandled the Florida front last year. So, again, we go into this game, and that is a key matchup. Florida's going to be missing some important players along that defensive line. Still has a bunch of bodies, but if they can't figure out a way to create some pressure, Jordan, I don't know if you know, Florida's only has 2 sacks through 3 games, okay? Now, Long Island barely passed, but 2 sacks through 3 games. This unit, tell us about the strengths of this offensive line, what they do well, and what would be maybe a concern for Miami, an area that maybe Florida potentially could exploit there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a veteran unit. You look at the group, right tackle Francis Malinois Jr. started every game of his career. He's been a 3-year starter. Right guard Inez Cooper, 4th-year starter, started basically every game of his career. Their center in James Brockermeyer. He's a transfer from TCU, but he's been very steady to start the season. Markel Bell at left tackle, he's only 6'9" and plays like he's about 3 inches shorter in terms of just his athleticism and his nimbleness. Left guard, they've been rotating a little bit between Matt McCoy, who started the Florida game last year and more or less started every game for Miami last year, and Samson Okunlola, who was a 5-star prospect who's finally starting to break through. This group, it's everybody, even if they haven't started, this entire group outside of the center have been together for a minimum 2 years now. So they have the chemistry, they have the camaraderie. They all basically know what their assignments are. They know what they need to do in order to be successful. And that's Mario Cristobal's bread and butter, is beefing up in the trenches. He's an offensive lineman. That's where he succeeds. That's where he knows that success draws from. Like you said, if they don't have a competent and strong offensive line, the rest of the offense is basically pointless because you're not going to have the time to throw. You're not going to have the gaps to open up for the run game. And they've done everything really well. I broke down the numbers on Monday, and I think on Pro Football Focus, they're top 10 in run blocking, and they're in the top 20 in the FBS and top 20, top 25 in pass blocking. And Carson Beck's only been sacked twice so far, and they just have been very strong. If the only thing I can see from the UF side, if they're able to get through on the interior, specifically on the from left tackle to center, if they're able to attack that side and succeed there and get to Carson Beck's blind side, that would probably be the only real hope, because Francis Malignolo and Inez Cooper, right tackle and right guard, they're just absolutely phenomenal. The left side is a little weaker, but not by much. So it's going to be a very tough test for Florida, but it's also going to be a tough test for Miami, because this is going to be probably their biggest test. Notre Dame was a tough test, but they barely got pressure out there. And it was also week one. It was a lot of feeling out. Now that there is some tape and there is 3 weeks worth of things for you have to look at, this is probably going to be one of Florida's tougher tests so far this season in terms of containing some rush.
Zach, before you ask a question, I just want to make two quick points. You mentioned the one side of the offensive line that may be a potential concern for Miami. That, I believe, Zach, would be where Caleb Banks would be playing if he was playing. Okay. So Florida's going to be without its best defensive lineman. The second point is Inez Cooper. For those that don't know, obviously, Jordan, you have a background in Gainesville, and I went to Florida, but before this, I covered another school, and people get mad at me for bringing that up. But I will tell you that Inez Cooper was a guy, Zach and Jordan, who Alabama and Auburn chose to not take or really recruit. Auburn did recruit him, but thought Brian Harsin, in all of his wisdom, the former Auburn coach, thought that he was a lot overweight. Yep. And I believe he was from Pleasant Grove, Alabama, if my memory's right. Auburn kind of decided not to take him. The kid wanted to stay in state. Miami, Alex Mirabal, I hope I'm getting all these names right, and Mario Cristobal said, hey, no, this is a guy we like. And look what he's done on that offensive line. Sometimes you just get you get lucky. You get lucky because if Alabama wanted that kid, Zach, he wasn't leaving the state of Alabama. I got news for it. And now he's a standout player. So you take it away, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to ask you, we've talked, Jordan, with the Florida players this week about their motivation for getting another shot at Miami and how that game impacted their season. What did that win for Miami? How did that impact their season last year? What did that mean for the program to come into the Swamp and get a win like that? And how does that play into this matchup on the Miami side of things this year?
I mean, for last year, it really kickstarted run for a potential spot in the college football playoff. Obviously, they didn't get it because they collapsed down the stretch. At Georgia Tech, the games at Georgia Tech and games at Syracuse, the defense just completely choked. But it gave them the sense of the Hurricanes knew internally that they had the talent to do it, to make a potential run and to beat some big teams. But to be able to do it on the field in the manner that they did it against Florida in week one, for Cam Ward to have such a big game, for Mark Fletcher, who was coming off injury, to have 2 rushing touchdowns, for the defense to completely rattle Graham Mertz. Obviously, Mertz was starting then, and then Lagway had come into that game late because Mertz got hurt. But for them to be able to manhandle Florida the way they did, that was the on-field proof for them that everything they felt internally could happen during the season. And they rattled off 9 straight wins. Obviously, they need a lot of magic. The Virginia Tech comeback, the Cal comeback from down 3 or 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
The Louisville shootout that they had to hold on for. But it gave them a sense of this can happen. And while there was a lot of turnover from last year to this year, it's sort of the same thing. I don't know how much the guys who are still here from last year's team look at that game as to what they're doing now, but it's similar to what they did with Notre Dame this year with week one. They go up by 2 touchdowns, they blow the lead, and then win it on the game-winning field goal in the final minute. For them, it's just another data point of if they're at their best, if they're executing what they need to do, they can hang with anybody. They showed it with Notre Dame. They showed the way they handled USF after the week after USF knocked off Florida, and it's just a confidence booster for the group. And everyone will say it, everyone will think, even though they don't want to say it, in-state games matter. The in-state rivalries, whether it's every year they have with FSU, the few times they get to play Florida, when USF comes in, even when they play Bethune-Cookman or FAMU, it's you want to make an impact when you're facing the teams in state, and that makes the Florida game on Saturday just that much more important, regardless of what it means for their future, because if they handle the ACC, they're going to be in the playoffs. But winning against Florida, it's just another thing for the rivalry.
Yeah.
Jordan, I listened to the Miami press conferences this week, and they're saying all the right things. When they say they're looking at the Florida that could be and not the Florida that is 1-2, do you believe that? And do you think the players believe that? Because sometimes players tend to get locked in on a team's record, right? And Florida's 1-2. And while fans are kind of making fun of Billy Napier for saying, hey, they could be 3-0, the reality of it is they could be 3-0. Yeah. So what do the players, is there any chance they're going to look at Florida and say, they're 1-2? Or are they looking at Florida as, they're 1-2, but if we're not careful, these guys can beat us?
No, I think they're definitely looking at this as the Florida team that could be 3-0. That's been their mentality through everything. I mean, USF was the same way. They looked at them going, yeah, they're a group of 5 team, but they beat these 2 teams. We obviously have to take them seriously. And then they just pounded them. They look at Florida. Again, Carson Beck, he's played Florida twice. He played against them. He knows the type of stuff they play. Obviously, he's beaten Florida both times, but he knows between just what they can bring. And look at the last game that Beck played against them. He threw 3 interceptions. It was one of his, on paper, obviously, he had a lot of good moments in that game. Georgia won it, but he knows that if he's not on his game, that Florida's defense can do some things to him, because they did do some things to him. So him having that experience, and Florida, the guys who played against Florida last year, having the experience of playing against Florida, regardless of what the final score was, they're going to be going into it knowing that this is a team that came in with expectations. They know that it's a team that's potentially fighting for its life in terms of knowing that this game could determine whether or not Billy Napier is still there come Sunday or Monday. He knows the motivation they could be playing for as they come down to Miami on Saturday.
No doubt, that's a great point. What do you your thoughts on Will Harris, Jordan, and how he's impacted Miami secondary? I see they're doing really good with takeaways and picks so far this year. And what type of juice does that even add more to the rivalry because of his history there?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely add some juice. And with the secondary overall, I mean, that was one of their weakest points last year. Their pass defense got torched down the stretch, especially in ACC play. They've completely overhauled that secondary. The only guy who's still there who started last year was O.J. Frederick. He was a freshman All-American last year. And then they hopped into the portal to basically grab everybody else. They've got Xavier Lucas, who played at Wisconsin last year, was an American Heritage alum, so he's a local kid here at the other outside outside corner spot. They got Zechariah Poyser from Jacksonville State and Jacoby Thomas from Tennessee as their safeties. They got Keontae Scott from Auburn to be their nickel corner, and all of them have really stepped up so far to start the season. I mean, you look at that group, they have a handful of takeaways already. They've figured out some things in pass coverage. They're not a finished product by any sense to me. There's a lot of work still to do. The 2 safeties specifically have talked about how they need to be cleaner in their lanes when it comes to tackling, but in terms of pass coverage, they've been pretty solid. They've only had, I think, 1 or 2 busts so far all year, and one of them was the one of the players having basically 2 options, and he just bid on the wrong one against Notre Dame. That led to one of their long plays, but they've held their own throughout the first 3 weeks. If they get the DJ Lagway, who everyone at Florida is probably hoping DJ Lagway is, not the DJ Lagway they saw last week against LSU, he could put up a good test against them, especially if he's able to run around a little bit. But this has been a very vastly improved secondary from last season, and that is one of the key things that will determine this team's success, because the offense, obviously, they're going from the number 1 offense in the country to trying to just maintain a top 20 offense. If they can maintain a top 20, top 25 offense this year, that to me is a success. If the defense can improve dramatically from where it was last year, that's going to determine whether this is a good Miami team or a great Miami team by the end of the season.
Jordan, back in 1985, long before either one of you guys were around, not only did Florida win for the last time, most recent time in Miami, but that year, Florida played Florida State at home. And I walked into the stadium as a little kid with my dad, and my dad said, "Hey, I've been told to keep an eye on this Sanders kid for FSU, the true freshman defensive back." Florida dominated FSU that day, but Deion Sanders had a punt return for a touchdown. A prime time was born. And I bring that up because he was a true freshman. And this kid, Malachi Toney, everybody's been talking about him for years down in South Florida. And as a true freshman, he is not disappointed at all. 18 catches, 228 yards. What is the feeling? Miami's had a lot of great players, a double-digit Pro Football Hall of Fame guys, the 5 national titles, yada, yada, yada. But this guy seems like one of these special guys that only comes through your program once in a while. Too much hype too soon, or is that legit?
I think that's legit. And just to preface even more, not just a true freshman, he reclassified to graduate a year early. He just turned 18 on Wednesday. He just turned 18 on Wednesday.
Wow.
So the fact that he's doing this early, this fast, and against the competition that he's faced, again, the Notre Dame game, he had 6 catches, 80-some yards, and a touchdown. He caught the first touchdown for Miami this season against the top 10 Notre Dame team. He's started all 3 games in the slot so far, and from watching him since he got here in the spring, I think it was 2 or 3 practices in, I was looking around a couple of my colleagues and was like, yeah, he'll be starting the Notre Dame game. It was that simple. It was that obvious how talented he was. It was just a matter of how quickly was he going to get the coaching staff's trust to let him at 17 years old be one of their starting receivers on a group that has to basically replace every wide receiver they had last year. Remember, Xavier Restrepo left for the NFL. Sam Brown left for the NFL. Isaiah Horton transferred to Alabama. Jacoby George left for the NFL. Tight end Elijah Arroyo left for the NFL. All 5 of them combined accounted for about 85% of Miami's passing game last year, receiving yards and touchdowns. They'd completely overhaul it. They brought some guys in from the transfer portal. CJ Daniels, who makes an incredible grab every week, it feels like. Keelan Marion, who was mainly brought in to be a kick returner, but is showing his value in the passing game. Now you have Malachi Toney, who is looking like he's setting a stage to become the next big thing in Miami. I don't want to put that much pressure on him right away, but he basically said after the spring game, when I asked him, who is Malachi Toney? He said, I'm the guy who's a game changer. Put the ball in my hands, watch me go, watch me put on the show. And 3 weeks into the season, he's already living up to his own expectations for himself.
Yes, he is. No doubt. As we wrap up here with Jordan McPherson from the Miami Herald, Jordan, what do you view as the keys to this game? What do you think that Miami has to do to win? And how are some ways that you could see Florida potentially coming out with an upset based on some of Miami's weaknesses?
Yeah, I would just say all around for both teams, clean football, whether it's limiting turnovers and for both teams not having boneheaded penalties. We saw for UF how that happened against USF. It hasn't happened much for Miami this year, but they have had a few penalties that have extended drives for opponents. And we've seen that throughout the history of Mario Cristobal's tenure over his first 3 years, where there was a lot of undisciplined plays that led to the opponents being able to capitalize. It hasn't happened much this year. This seems like a much more mature team, but if a penalty here or a penalty there creeps up and extends a drive and UF's able to capitalize on it, it gives UF a chance to be dangerous. It gives them a chance to have some life. So if Miami can minimize its own mistakes, I think Miami should be able to cruise through this game. But if Miami lets Florida hang around, anything can happen.
All right, Jordan, before we let you go, you comfortable making a pick? Anything? This doesn't run till Friday, just so you know.
Yeah, no, I am. I think Miami's going to win. I know the line's like 8 points or whatnot. I think if Miami does what it should do, I think it's going to be probably a 10 to 14 point game. I'll go Miami. Let's go 31. Let's go 31-17.
All right.
All right, Jordan.
Yeah, now, Jordan, before we let you go, I do want to get your perspective on Florida. You're a UF grad. You've covered this program. You're familiar with the ebbs and flows and all the coaching changes. Just from an outsider's perspective that has knowledge of this place, what is your thoughts on the state of Florida football Napier on the hot seat, how this season has started and where Florida goes from here.
Yeah. So again, with the way everything started last year, I was thinking, okay, when is Napier getting fired last season? Then obviously rattles off the run that he did, that the Gators did to end the season. And I'll be honest, I bought into the hype. I'm an AP voter. I had Florida in my top 15 to start the season. I thought that was a strong finish. Let's see what Lagway has with a chance to be the full-time starter. Obviously, the injuries leading into the season impacted some things, but it's a tough spot to be in right now if you're Billy Napier. I mean, you're 500 right now. We've seen what's happened over these last few years. Again, I was a student at UF the last 2 years of Muschamp, and I was there, covered the team all 3 years of Jim McElwain. So I've seen some rough football, and it's looking a lot like that, where it's you have a couple wins, they get a couple wins that give them hope, and then the carpet just gets dragged right out from under them right again. So for me, I just feel like it's a matter of not if, but when the hammer finally drops on Billy Napier. And again, if it's a blowout this week, with you having a bye next week, it could make sense. I could see it make sense. Again, I have no insider information on this. That's just from my thought process of seeing it from the outside and just knowing the way that everything works in college football. When you have the extra time, if you can get it done early, try to salvage what you can for recruiting for the future. Try to minimize or mitigate as much damage as you can on that front. If it's a rough game for the Gators this weekend, yeah, I could see that happening.
Well, Jordan, thanks for the pick-me-up, man. Yeah. Oh, man, Zach, you want to just stop the show right now?
Hey, talking like a guy that covered the Muschamp and the McElwain eras.
Hey, look, I mean,
freedom of choice, not freedom of consequence, right, Zach?
Yeah, that's Jordan. Right. No, I'm kidding, Jordan. Of course, we appreciate. Hey, great stuff, man. We appreciate your work. I read all your stuff. I'm a Miami native originally, and Zach, thanks for getting Jordan to do this. Jordan, we appreciate it. We'll see you down in Miami this weekend, man. Good stuff.
And Jordan, real quick, if you want to plug your work, just let folks know where they can find you, and also if they're Florida Panthers fans as well, if they want to read your hockey stuff too.
Yeah, so like Zach said, I cover both the Hurricanes and I cover the Florida Panthers. Training camp starting on Thursday for them. But you guys can find me on Twitter at J_McPherson1126. And all my work's on the Miami Herald website, miamiherald.com. You get it online, on the app, however you like to consume your news.
All right,
Jordan, we appreciate the time, and we'll see you down in Miami, brother.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Take
man.
care.
Man, that was good stuff.
Oh, yeah. That
dude's
thorough.
Team, man.
Funny question about Jordan. We worked together at SEC Country, and they were looking to hire a third person. And when they interviewed him for the job, our head person at Cox Media Group asked him to break down the entire roster. And Jordan just spit out stuff about every single player, and they're like, all right, you're hired.
Impressive young guy, man. Impressive young guy. Miami Herald always has fantastic reporters, and he's certainly up near the top of the list these days. All right, Zach, we got some more to talk about this game as well. Here's the look. Forget about everything else, all right? The matchups, all that stuff. I go back and look at history, all right? Miami leads the series 30-27, which isn't much. That's fairly close. But what's troubling to me is that Florida has now played 8 ranked Miami teams since 1982 and has not won any of them. The last win over a ranked Miami team by Florida was 1982. Again, 0-8 since then. I don't like that trend. Here's another trend I don't like. Florida has never, Zach, never beaten a Miami team ranked in the top 10.
Wow.
And Miami enters this game number 4. Unfortunately, and I've had people argue with me on the message boards about this. Look, you know me, I'm a total nerd. I go back and I look at the history books. I look up the newspaper clippings from these games to see what happened. And even when Florida dominated the series in the 70s, Zach, and Florida had far superior teams, they barely beat 2-win Miami teams. For whatever reason, Florida just doesn't seem to play great in this game. What was that win in in Orlando a few years ago when Florida won 24-20?
Ugly game.
Felipe Franks and Jaron Williams. Florida was ranked in the top 10. Miami was unranked, and Florida sort of needed that late defensive push to hold off Miami. It just, for whatever reason, Miami just seems to rise in this game. And Florida has risen at times, 85, but that 85 team should have beaten Miami.
Yeah, I was going to say Miami wasn't even ranked.
That's right. 83. Florida killed Miami in the swamp, but Miami was, even though they
Unranked.
won the national title, they were unranked and breaking in. First time starting quarterback, very first game ever, Bernie Kosar. Florida wins 28-3. Miami had 7 turnovers in that game. And Howard Schnellenberger, the coach at the time, said afterwards, Zach, and I bring this up for a reason, he said, we technically won the game. Technically won the game. And that just, could you imagine Billy Napier saying, hey, look, if you go back and look on film, we probably should have won last week's game. People would be irate. But what he was saying was if you eliminated the turnovers, Miami was right there and probably, much closer than 28-3. Was he full of it? I don't know. But Miami won every game the rest of the year and did win the national title. But Zach, Florida never seems to play well in this game. Last year didn't play well in this game. The Jeff Driscoll disaster down in Miami, where Florida held Miami.
I still remember the Brock Berlin game. That's like the worst.
Horrible. What were they up, 33-10 or something like that?
Yeah, they were blowing them out. Yeah, 33-10, exactly.
The Driscoll Muschamp game where they held Miami to well under 200 yards of offense and still couldn't figure out a way to win that game.
Yeah, and Florida was ranked number 12 and lost to an unranked Miami team.
So maybe it's time. Maybe it's just that time where Florida's going to figure it out and put it all together. I think the pieces are there, but something's missing. Something's missing. The quarterback play has been way too uneven. And now you wonder, is self-doubt going to creep in at all? Zach, this is a team that just beat the death out of them last year. Now they got to go down there and play them again. What's the psyche of the team right now? You interviewed all these kids this week.
Yeah, I mean, you ask me that every week, and I
know.
I do like to give people a sense, but I got to say it's kind of hard to, take these guys at face value just based on the results. I will say, I mean, I don't think that they certainly showed up in Death Valley, so I don't think it was a matter of, not showing up for the game, not having a good week of practice, at least certainly on the defensive side of the ball. But I just hearing from the players this week, it sounds like they haven't quit. It sounds like they're still behind Napier. They feel like, just from watching that film against LSU, that they're kind of singing the same tune as Napier in terms of they feel like they were a few plays away from winning that game. And while that's not necessarily wrong, I don't know necessarily that that's what you want to be building your confidence from, and I don't necessarily know that they are, but that is kind of how they're viewing this situation that they're in. They're certainly not feeling like they're defeated and that they've got no answers and that they've got no chance. Castell said that they're still out there practicing hard. I do think that as easy as it could be for them to dwell or to be down on themselves because they're 1-2, because they lost to USF at home. I mean, there's still no shame in losing to LSU. But I don't know. I get the sense that because it's the Florida-Miami game, because Miami is ranked so high, there's also Texas coming up too. Not that I think that they're thinking about that game, but like there's a lot left for these guys to get jacked for. There's a lot of pride that they're still left to play for. So I don't think that they're at that point where you got to worry about guys checking out or starting to feel like they can't compete. They feel like they can.
I think people, if Florida hadn't just lost to USF, I think Florida fans could have accepted last week's loss. It happens, right? Sometimes these things happen. You just have one of those games where everything goes wrong on one side of the ball. But then you couple that with the fact that they just kind of handed USF the game the week before. Well, actually, I don't want to say that. Gosh, I guess Florida thinks they handed it to them. USF people think they just flat out beat them. But it's not even that they're losing so much as how they're losing. When Billy Napier says they could be 3-0, I don't think that elicits the response he thinks it's going to get. I think he's thinking, hey, this is a sign that this is a good football team. And I think fans are thinking, but they're not 3-0, and they think they have a pretty good idea why they're not 3-0.
Yeah.
And I think they all think it's him, if we're going to be totally frank here. Let's just be grown-ups here. This is a massive challenge, Zach. 2 or 3 things you think Florida's got to do to have any shot. What would you say?
Turnovers. They got to win the turnover battle, or at least not lose it. That's certainly coming off of last week, but also I think just based on the way that Miami has played defensively, they rank in the top 30 nationally in turnover margin. They in takeaways and interceptions. They rank top 15 actually nationally in takeaways. They got 6 so far this season. So they've been really opportunistic getting after the ball. So I think that turnover margin is going to be key in this game. I basically had this as a key last week, but not necessarily as explicitly. But I think that Florida has to find a way to establish the run game with Jaden Baugh. He needs more carries. Florida needs success and production on the ground, and they need to be able to certainly shorten the game and try to control the clock by being able to do that, but also take some pressure off of DJ Lagway so that he's not throwing 49 passes in this game again. And then I think, I could point to a few things, honestly, Keith, but I think one thing that Florida needs to do is hit explosive plays. I think Miami is going to have their fair share of them in this game, but I do expect Florida's defense to play well and probably, I expect them to play well enough to win. I think Miami will score the most points on them that they've given up this season. But I think because of that, the Gators have to hit some explosive plays on offense, specifically in the passing game. But they've just got to do some things to create momentum, to get them energized on the bench, and to get them feeling like they've got a shot to score some points. This is going to be a really tough defense that they play. So being able to hit some explosive plays and establish the run, I think, is key.
You got a score prediction?
Not for the show.
Not for the show. Okay. You're going to make them pay for it
on the site on Friday. Going into this season, Keith, I picked Miami. I picked Florida. I did not necessarily expect Miami to be this good or look this good early, and I certainly didn't expect this from Florida. I did have them losing at LSU, but not because of 5 interceptions from DJ Lagway and just the way that he's looked through 3 weeks of the season. So there is part of me that wants to stick with my preseason pick and pick Florida to pull off the upset. I don't know if it's because if it's the rivalry. I don't know, like you said, Keith, because Florida's due. I feel like there is a game still out there where DJ Lagway puts it together and has a performance that's what we're used to seeing from him. I just don't know when that's going to be and when that's going to happen. I don't know if it'll be this week. I don't know. And I also don't know if it'll be in enough time for Florida to turn their season around. But it needs to happen soon, and it needs to happen fast. Certainly Saturday would be the game for that to be the case. I expect him to play better. The way that they've looked offensively, I just don't know that they're going to be able to do more than what Miami can.
Okay. Well, Zach, you ever heard of the Harlem Globetrotters? You're a young guy. I hope you still have
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you know that they actually lost several games to the Washington Generals? In an orchestrated sports environment, they actually lost some games. And I mention that because anything can happen in sports. Now, sometimes when you say anything can happen, that's sort of the last resort comment. Well, anything can happen, right? I do think Florida has some ability here. I do think Florida has the talent to match up with Miami in certain areas. I think the defense, although they haven't played an offense like this, I would say that Miami hasn't played a defense like this. So I think Florida can create some problems. They're going to have to do special things to generate pressure on Carson Beck, and that means rushing Aaron Childs, doing more with Miles Graham, the other linebacker, corner blitzes, things that they're going to have to do something to keep that kid off balance, right? If Miami establishes the run game early, that's going to be problematic too. But defensively, I think Florida can hang with them. The question is, they've hung with the last two teams and really stifled the last two teams, and it wasn't enough. At what point does the defense to these guys say, man, we're doing all we can do, man. We can't hold it together forever. And then the dam breaks. So that's a concern. On the other side of the ball, I have not seen anything from Florida's offense this season, And I haven't seen anything from Florida's offense last season to give me an enormous amount of confidence going into this game. Even during that 4-game stretch, Florida led to a winning streak last year to end the year. Florida led 6-0 over Tulane at the half. Florida looked ugly on offense against FSU. Ole Miss and LSU both had a lot more yards and more first downs than Florida. There haven't been these dominant offensive performances. Last year, it could be chalked up to youth at the quarterback position, okay? I don't know, other than Lagley missing all this time this offseason, which is significant, but other than that, you thought that, well, they could always lean on the run game, and they haven't, maybe because they can't. I don't know. Maybe because they've just not called the right plays. I don't know, but they haven't. The offensive line hasn't been terrible. I wouldn't say that. It's been fairly decent, but the penalties are too significant. Zach, I think Florida's got to do something different. I know everybody says come out and establish the run, and part of me agrees with that, and the other part of my brain says they've got to do something different because what they're doing hasn't worked, all right? I think they need to come out and take some shots early downfield. If a pass gets picked and it's 60 yards down, so be it. Just consider it a punt.
Yeah.
Take some shots. Try to soften up that defense. Continue to utilize Jaden Baugh and Jacoby Jackson in the passing game like they did last week to neutralize Miami's defense, hit shots over the middle, and maybe that'll soften things up for the ground game. I want to see them go the opposite this week. Instead of establishing the run, which is what Miami surely thinks they're going to do with Lagley struggling.
And we also don't know if Florida can.
Well, that's
against
true.
them.
That's true. I would like to see Florida go in the opposite direction, thinking that, hey, Miami's going to think we're going to keep this conservative because of DJ Lagley struggles. Let's be explosive early, put something out there to give them something to think about and roll the dice, because otherwise I just don't know that they have the we just haven't seen anything. Zach, there's nothing offensively we've seen this year to give you any bit of confidence whatsoever going into this game. Not one thing.
We've just seen a little bit of flashes here, like the drive at LSU when they responded after the touchdown.
Yeah,
when like their only touchdown. Yeah, they've had some moments, but no, you're right. I mean, that's what I said during my pick and prediction. I feel like it's still out there for Florida to try to put it together. But this is just a hard defense and a hard matchup to be trying to do that.
Yeah.
And, they could have used another, they could have used another non-conference opponent, maybe one not as good as USF, to kind of, sharpen up offensively. And, I do think, again, that DJ is going to get better each week. I just don't know at what point that he's going to get close to where he was last year. And if you listen or read the story from Gators Online this week from Shane Matthews, he doesn't think that DJ is going to get there at all this season. And it's not necessarily his feel for the game and his rhythm as a passer. He's concerned with his footwork. And he doesn't think that that's something that's going to get corrected this year. It's going to take a lot of training and a lot of fundamental work to shore that up. And I asked Napier about Lagley's footwork this week, and he says that when he's missing, it's because of his feet.
Yeah.
So that's something to monitor, obviously, in this game. But yeah, it's that matchup between him and Beck is certainly one to watch.
Zach, I'll give my prediction in a second. I've talked to a lot of players from the Spur era, and obviously you and I have joked about this. They're biased because that's their guy, but they've all said the same sort of thing. They've never loved the mechanics they were taught. We need to be clear. The mechanics that they were taught in that era of the quarterbacks under this regime. They just haven't been a fan of it. Zach, I've got Florida losing, and I think it's going to be, and I'll give my official prediction on the site at gatorsonline.com, in that 27-17 type range, something like that.
Okay.
I think they can keep it close. Look, if this is a 13-10 or 20-17 game in the fourth quarter and Florida's feeling it, but they need to see some results. Confidence needs to be, you need proof of concept, right? They need some proof of concept. They need to have some success early in the game to feel good about what they can do late in the game. But anyway, those are our predictions. We've got to do one more ad read here, and we're going to get into something really exciting to me and Zach.
No doubt. Let's give a shout real quick as I jump that off the screen.
We don't have a producer, people. It's us. Just us.
Well, the season has officially kicked off, and college football season is Modelo season. If you're listening to this right now, it means it's time for a reward. It's Friday. The weekend is here. Another slate of college football games, and reward your full-time fandom with an ice-cold Modelo. Modelo is the official beer sponsor of the college football playoff. Gator Nation, you deserve a Modelo.
Zach, I think Modelo's sales have been through the roof in Gainesville the last couple of weekends. I mean, this is,
Hey, maybe they're celebrating for a different reason. Saturday
well, there's
night.
also celebratory drinking. There's sad drinking, but no, Modelo's great. I love it. I know you.
I know Vernon Maxwell was popping open some Modelos this week, man.
Right. So big news this week, and look, I mean, it's people are going to have different takes on this, but Florida, and I'm going to get you to get into what happened and why it got to this point, but Florida has restored the records of the great Vernon Maxwell, the standout shooting guard for the Gators, who played at Florida from 1985 to 1989, a 4-year starter at the University of Florida. He had 3 seasons over 19.9 points a game, 2 seasons over 20 points a game. But he also was part of a team that was under NCAA investigation, and there were infractions found. And former athletic director Bill Arnsparger stripped Maxwell of his final 2 seasons scoring records. All right, all that stuff. So when he left college, Zach, he was number 2 all time in the SEC.
Behind Pete Maravich.
Yeah, behind Pistol Pete Maravich.
Pete.
Okay, that's it. That's how good Vernon Maxwell was. And I was at every single home game when he played. Okay. That has all been restored. Vernon Maxwell with 2,450 points as a Florida Gator is once again the all-time leading scorer in Florida Gators basketball history. Scott Strickland, Florida's athletic director, made this move, telling Chris Harry of FloridaGators.com, it's about time. And Vernon is now the number 3 all-time leading scorer in the SEC, behind only Pistol Pete Maravich, who's way ahead of everybody, and then the great Allen Houston of Tennessee. But Vernon's in number 3, and he's got some real distance between anybody that could potentially catch him. He's going to be number 3 for a long time, Zach. Gainesville native,
top 5 forever.
Yes, Gainesville native. That's right. Gainesville native, played at my high school alma mater, Buchholz. I went to games and watched him play when I was a little kid.
Wow.
Florida landed an interesting.
It had to be cool for you to write that story today, then.
It was. And look, Vernon's done a lot of growing up. He wasn't always a great guy, or didn't always do things that would make you think he was a good guy. Had some issues. But Zach, Buchholz graduate, first team All-State in basketball and football in the largest class in the state of Florida as a senior. There hadn't been many guys do that. You can count them on one hand. He picked Florida at the time over NC State and the late, great Jim Valvano, which had just won the national title a couple years earlier. So big news. And you tweeted about this a little earlier. You did some research into kind of what got him having those records stripped in the first place. So what can you tell us?
Well, first of all, there's been a lot of coverage about him and his Florida career and his off the court stuff. And there's a lot of, ugly parts of his past, but I think that it's important to recognize that he didn't get his points stripped for anything that he did that had to do with, relationships that he had privately, or some of the drug stuff that was part of his past. He was stripped of his points for a very specific, reason. And if you read up on it, according to the Tampa Bay Times and also an article from the Gainesville Sun, there were 2 things specifically that caused him to have his 2 seasons stripped. The one that's the wildest is that it was because he had an agent, and the NCAA ruled him ineligible for the 1987 and 1988 NCAA tournaments because he had an agent. Now, that was also a 2-parter. He was also reportedly had his record stripped because his former coach, Sloan, paid for Maxwell's airfare to go to an off-season basketball camp in Boston. So that is why he got his points stripped, because he got ruled ineligible by the NCAA because he had an agent and because his coach paid for an airline ticket, which was against NCAA rules. And obviously Norm Sloan paid the price for that. Now, after that happened and Florida got under investigation and he ended up in court, a whole bunch of other stuff came out after the fact. And after his time in Gainesville, he had a bunch of issues off the court. And I think that, some of the stuff that came out in the trial, and then obviously some of the stuff that came out about him personally, just kind of kept Florida from never even considering restoring his records. But obviously things have changed over the last 35 years. And it's important to note exactly why he got his record stripped, because the reasons why he got his record stripped are no longer against NCAA rules. So to not have those points count anymore, when countless athletes across college athletics have agents and have their airfare and a bunch of other things compensated, that no longer holds. But there was two other reasons, Keith, I think, why his records have been restored. And I think if these two other things don't happen, he probably gets his records restored anyway because of how things have changed with NCAA rules. But Florida had never had to confront Vernon Maxwell's records not standing until Walter Clayton Jr. Walter Clayton Jr. forced the issue by having the season that he had, because of how well he performed for the Gators. They were coming out and saying that he was the all-time leading scorer for the single season record, which he was not. And they had never had another player that scored enough points to finish second to Vernon, but therefore be called the all-time leading scorer because his records didn't count. So that was an interesting dynamic that Florida was promoting that and using that in press releases and in stories when, in fact, he was not. So I think that kind of forced it to come to a head. And the third thing, and maybe this is the thing that had the least amount of influence, but it's something to be said. Vernon's gotten kind of popular. He's kind of blown up over the past year or so because of his appearances on podcasts and some of his viral social media clips and talking about fighting with Hakeem Olajuwon and some of his times with the Rockets. But he's a lot of basketball fans have grown to love and appreciate him and his personality. So, and with that, he was on several shows and podcasts talking about this and talking about how Florida did him wrong, and having people like Steven Jackson saying, hey, Florida needs to do the right thing and restore his record. So all of those things led us to where we are today.
Well, a couple of things here. I think, I don't want to be too judgmental of former athletic director Bill Arnsparger, who, but by the way, was a great football coach too.
The late Bill Arnsparger.
That's right. And in that time period, it was different. Florida's football team had just been hammered a couple years earlier by the NCAA, and perception more than ever was crucial to a university that had been humiliated by the penalties against the football team. All right. So one of the seasons that the records were wiped out was the 86-87 season when I believe Florida made the NCAA tournament for the first time in school history, correct?
Yeah.
And also reached the Sweet 16. Zach, this would have been the 87 NCAA tournament. And in that Sweet 16, Florida lost to Syracuse. I'm going by memory here, Zach. I want to say 87-81. A famous Syracuse team with Derek Coleman and Ronnie Cycli. And I want to say one other great point guard as well. Florida nearly won that game. If not for a Ronnie Cycli block late in the game, Florida would have been up, or a Derek Coleman block, Florida would have been up big, was maybe cruising to a win. A 4-point play kind of changed everything. Well, I mentioned that because Syracuse made it to the NCAA championship game and nearly beat Indiana. Lost on that last second shot, I want to say, by Keith Smart. So Florida had the goods at. They could have theoretically gone on and win the whole thing if they'd beaten Syracuse. And that title would have been stripped. Okay?
Yeah.
So in the moment, I don't want to be too judgmental of Bill Arnsparger, but I'm happy for Vernon Maxwell.
Yeah, I mean, it's also too, Keith, at the time, what he did was against NCAA rules.
That's right. That's right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
As trivial as it may have been, it was against the rules.
That's right. And Scott Strickland said it best. I said it's about time was his quote. His quote actually was, it's time. And he's right. Time heals a lot of wounds. I've been texting or DMing Vernon for months, quite frankly. We've been going back and forth. I did a Mount Rushmore of Florida players after the Gators won the national title. My two guards were Vernon Maxwell and Walter Clayton. Much love, Keith, my brother. He sent me, and he said, anything I write about him, he says, I will always share immediately. I appreciate your support always. He made mistakes. It happened. He's an older guy now. You're right. He's hilarious on Twitter. He goes after Utah Jazz fans almost daily. And they actually and I think they actually like him for it, quite frankly. An interesting guy, an enigma at times. In the NBA, obviously, had a successful career. Zach, over 10,000 career points, was a member of 2 NBA championship teams, played a much bigger role on one of them. The second one, I think he was out for health reasons. Had a famous Game 7 against John Starks, who was getting a lot of pub as the star, one of the big stars of the NBA. Vernon not only shut him down, but tripled his scoring, I want to say, in that game. So a key member of that Houston Rockets' first NBA championship team. And the other thing about Vernon, I want to say, is in the NBA, because of he was fierce and he was a little crazy at times, he was always known as Mad Max. And I would tell people, if you ever run into him, just call him Hawk. Just call him Hawk. He never liked the Mad Max term. He embraced it. He's got things now. He's living with it and is utilizing it. But he always liked the nickname Hawk. That was his nickname around Gainesville. I want to say he grew up just east of PK Young, right over there.
Sugar Hill, baby, Sugar Hill.
They called him, maybe was it Porter's or Sugar, whatever. And he, but he liked the nickname Hawk because he could soar into that air. When he shot a jump shot, Zach, he was 2 feet off the ground. He was way up there. Hell of a player. I remember all of his. I'm not going to bore the hell out of everybody here. I remember a lot of his great battles. He had one memorable game against Kentucky where Florida and Vernon outdueled Rex Chapman and Kentucky. And in that game, Chapman and Vernon Maxwell, Zach, ran knee to knee and head to head and both lay on the ground for several seconds. And I don't think I've ever heard the O'Connell Center as quiet as it was at that time, because you remember, Zach, back in the mid-late 80s, Kentucky usually had about 3,000 fans at the O-Dome, okay? But a fantastic player, and like Scott Strickland said, it's time.
I mean,
Zach,
can you imagine if they took Walter Clayton's points away because he got a plane ticket paid for by Golden?
Yeah, it's different times. I guess it's funny to see the evolution of college sports.
Yeah,
and
but at the time when it came out, I'm sure that was frowned at. I'm sure it was looked on like, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah,
I mean, Sloan lost his job over it.
Yeah, he did. He certainly did, and that led to the worst season in the history of Gators football, or Gators basketball, probably. The Don DeVoe regime. And who started for that Don DeVoe team? Willie Jackson. Father of Gators wide receiver Khalil Jackson. So anyway, Zach.
Well, congrats to Vernon, man. He well-deserved. Long overdue, but better late than never.
In his quotes, and I can read them to Chris Harry of FloridaGators.com. We got to give credit where it's due. He got the quote from Vernon Maxwell. I fell on the floor. I was ecstatic. Man, I'm just so happy. This is a blessing for me and my family. Honestly, I never, ever thought this was going to happen. He's a mellow guy now. Time has passed. God, Vernon Maxwell, 60 years old, Zach. 60 years old.
This happened 35 years ago, Keith.
Man, it's crazy. Anything else you want to add, or are we wrapping it up?
Well, I just want to add this last thing. You mentioned his tweets.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with what Keith is talking about, this is the pinned tweet that Vernon Maxwell has on his Twitter profile. He says, "I'd like to apologize to Jazz fans that were offended by my tweets. If I knew you guys had internet in Utah, I would have never made those tweets."
He's something else, man. He's always stirring it up. And in fact, I will point out, I am lifelong friends with his coach at Buchholz High School, Rick Swain. Rick's daughter and I are extremely close friends. And Rick Swain just called me about a month ago to talk to me about some Gators stuff. And I'm sure he's ecstatic today. I'm getting ready to call him now. In fact, a lot of people out there are supportive of Vernon. Made mistakes. It happened. Florida's moved on. I like this move from Scott Strickland. And
yeah, me too.
It's great to end this show on a positive note, Zach. We're gonna both be down at Hard Rock Stadium.
After we had Jordan come on here and rip away all their hopes.
We're going to be at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens on Saturday night. Kickoff is at 7:30 between the Gators and the number 4 Miami Hurricanes. If you like what we're doing with the Gators Online show, and by the way, I think you do because the numbers are going through the roof, and we appreciate every one of you. Hit the like button and the subscribe button below. As always, we've got a lot of great content and intel at GatorsOnline.com. In fact, earlier this week, Zach put it out there that Dallas Wilson was going to be out. And sure enough, he's out. And now we know that he'll be practicing again next week. Good scoop from Zach, one of many that he puts on our site daily. So make sure you check out GatorsOnline.com. Zach, you about ready to get in the car and drive down to Miami with me?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready. I'm ready for the 305. It's calling our name.
It is. All right. We'll do this again after the game with our rapid reaction. And you never know. Maybe Florida's going to pull this thing out. It's sometimes when you leave a program for dead historically, when you think Florida's done and finished and the toe tag is on them, they do something that you don't expect, like last year. So we'll see how it goes. For Zach Albaverdi, I am Keith Niebuhr. This is the Gators Online Show. Thank you. Have a safe trip if you're headed down to Miami. Have a safe at-home weekend if you're not. Try not to go too crazy watching the game. Take care, everybody.